Good evening. Thank you for having all of us here tonight. It's super exciting for me to come back to the university I graduated from many years ago. And thank you so much for coming despite the snow, the weather. We're going to have a great event tonight. So without further ado, we're going to get started. So first of all, I just want to speak a little bit about SOA's global reach and global presence. And you'll see in this chart, it's pulled as of year-end 2024. Canada is the second largest market outside of the United States. But I want to point out that we have actually really growing presence of candidates and members outside of North America. And you'll see that between China, Asia Pacific, rest of the world, we have more than 25% of candidates coming from those. So truly, we are growing our presence everywhere. And now we have, outside of North America, we have offices in Beijing, Hong Kong, Dubai, Singapore, and now we have a new staff joining us from India as well. So I'd like to now invite Ben Marshall, the Regional Director of Americas, to introduce Dave Dillon, our guest of honor tonight.
Thank you, Sally. As Sally said, my name is Ben Marshall. I'm Regional Director for the Americas, which is an international role outside the U.S. So Americas in that definition includes Canada, Mexico, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. I happen to be based in Canada, actually not that far outside of Waterloo. But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about Dave Dillon and Austin Reese-Dew, who is our moderator tonight. Dave, I've known for about 9 years. He's a well-respected member of the SOA. He is an expert in the U.S. healthcare industry, but he is also, of all the actuaries I've known in my career, he is one of the most outgoing, friendly, kind people. Often you hear about actuaries lacking social skills. That's changing over time, and I don't want to attribute that to anybody here. But if you want to learn about good interpersonal skills and making people, bringing people onto the team, watch Dave Dillon. He is just a tremendous networker, but a sincere and kind individual that just elevates the level of actuary in terms of what we can do beyond technical skills. So he's with Lewis and Ellis in Dallas, but I know he can tell you a bit more about himself, and you'll find out more during this interview, fireside chat. One of the connections that Dave has, I mentioned he lives in Dallas, originally from Oklahoma. Austin Reese-Dew is from Texas, Austin, Texas. Well, I know that you're named after the University of Texas. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but Austin is a PhD candidate here. He teaches classes. Many of you probably already know him. So you'll get to know these two gentlemen throughout this fireside chat. But I just wanted to say welcome. Thank you for being here, especially only a week after ASNA. It's great to see a room full of actuarial students willing to come out to another student event. It'll be well worth your time, and get to know Dave. Also get to know Austin, another great networker, another great gregarious, outgoing, kind individual that represents the actuarial profession well. So I'll leave it at that. Gentlemen, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for being here this evening. Thank you, Ben, for the really kind introduction, and Sally as well. And thank you, Dave, for being here. It's really a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Anytime a Texan can come up to this weather, I appreciate you. I appreciate the invite for the second. Can you hear me all right back there? All right, thank you.
Wonderful. So I'd like to begin and kind of open it up. Just let everybody get to know you a little bit and talk about your background. How'd you encounter the profession for the first time, and where'd you come from?
Yeah, so I would say some of my background's probably similar, but a little dissimilar too. So I always loved math. All right. So you know how when you're somewhere and your parents take you somewhere and you're bored and you might doodle? I used to do math problems. All right. And you know it's bad when your mom makes fun of you for doing something like that. But so I used to do math problems instead of draw. So I always wanted to do something with math. One thing that was a little different was I was introduced to the actuarial science world a little bit early. My father worked for an insurance company. in Oklahoma, which if you don't know Oklahoma, it's kind of a smaller rural Texas wannabe type state, not a whole lot of insurance. But my dad was an insurance agent, and very early, I was about 13 years old. And my dad's like, you're good at math. Well, I'm going to introduce you to my chief actuary. So American Fidelity Assurance, the only actuarial employer in the state of Oklahoma, met with Chief Actuary Al Lichtenberg, and I was like, man, this is great. I loved it. So I kind of knew from age 13 on, I wanted a business job. I didn't, want to do research or no offense to some of here, I didn't want to teach, even though I do teach at the Georgia State program now, but that's a side gig, right? But I love the business job that you could do math. So I always kind of had that on my radar. And then that's kind of how I guess I got started. Went to Oklahoma State, had a pure math degree. Then I decided to go to Iowa, get a little more actuarial. I'll readily admit, didn't quite pass my early exams super quickly at Oklahoma State. So it's like, all right, I'll go to Iowa. Got a little better at passing exams through the education there. And then decided to find an actuarial job. I will say that, like a lot of people, I had one contributing or one overriding factor of what I wanted my job to be. That was not in the north. I was cold in Iowa. Weather like this, I was not used to. So in the southern U.S., there's not a whole lot of actuarial jobs. I mentioned American Fidelity only had one actuarial employer. I thought maybe I'd go work for them in my hometown of Oklahoma City. They had a nepotism rule, which meant since my dad worked there, I couldn't work there. So I basically found a job in Arkansas. If you don't know Arkansas, that's another small rural state in southern U.S. They had one job opening, all the state of Arkansas, and I was like, I'll take it. And that's how I got into the health world. So we could talk more about, my progression of my career, but that's kind of how I got into it. I was always good in math, but really wanted a job where I could, business job where I could use my math skills.
And so that was a traditional actuarial role where you started out?
It was, yeah. So I worked for a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. I was a traditional health. I primarily did reserves. I don't know, and I'll call it easy reserves. So if somebody you're doing life contingencies and stuff like that, that's the harder life reserve stuff. I will joke, and don't let any health actuary tell you different. Health actuary stuff's easier. It just is. All right. Especially on some of the reserves. Well, I think Austin's probably going to ask me a few questions about some stuff that's harder on the health side. But I did what we call incurred but not paid reserves. Basically, if you guys go into the doctor in December, they don't quite pay the bill, right, by December 31st. But the health actuary comes in and tells the insurance company how much, we model and estimate how many of you went to the hospital and, what your procedures were and that kind of stuff. So that was that's kind of where I started. And then I blended into, I'll say pricing. So any health insurance product that your family has, you have in the U.S., that was a lot of what I did.
All right, and I'd just like to say on the IBNP, IBNR stuff, the great Gord Wilmot up here at Waterloo that developed a lot of the modeling for that. I had the pleasure of taking a course with him where we learned all of that kind of stuff. So that was wonderful to have him up here too. And he just retired recently. So what got you from that to now you're in the consulting space? Obviously, you have been for quite some time. And so what kind of drew you into the consulting world, maybe away from the traditional actuarial world?
Well, I'll say two things. One, luck. And two, I chased a woman. All right, no lie. So I was living in Little Rock, Arkansas. As I said, there weren't many jobs there. As I kind of joked, I didn't want to really live north, but a lot of my friends lived in Chicago. They were trying to get me to move to Chicago, a lot more jobs. There was a young lady that was working on her master's in Little Rock. I happened to meet her about 2 months before she was moving to Dallas. She moved to Dallas, and I had that life decision. Do I move to Chicago to work at PwC or chase the girl to Dallas? I chased the girl to Dallas. I always joke that I guess I made the right decision. We've been married 25 years, still married. I have 3 kids and I have the same job when I moved to Dallas. So there's kind of a lot of luck involved there, but I'm not afraid to say I did chase a woman. And somewhat similar to what I was saying in Arkansas, Texas, for as big as Dallas is, it's not a lot of actuarial jobs. All right. And again, when I interviewed, there were 2 job openings and all the, town of 6 million people, there were 2 job openings. One was at Ernst & Young, traditional accounting firm, auditing, but they flat out told me that I would leave every Sunday night, fly to some city, not in Texas, be back Thursday night. And then there was a company I'd never heard of that had about 25 employees called Lewis Ellis. I'm like, do I have to travel? They said, no. I said, great, I'll take it. So that's how I ended up at Lewis Ellis. So I didn't necessarily know the consulting world was going to be perfectly correct for me, but it's been great. I love the consulting world. It is different. From a traditional role, you do, when I was at a Blue Cross, you do typically maybe kind of do one thing. You're kind of an expert. All right. I forget who the gentleman was. There was an actuary when I was at University of Iowa. There was an actuary from China that came over and spoke to us, and I wish I could remember his name, but the way he described it, sounds a little weird, but it makes sense. Is he said, when you're an actuary, you can be a pancake or a pretzel. Okay, so do you want to know a little about a lot or a lot about a little? When you work for an insurance company, generally, you know a lot about a little, you know a lot about one thing. When you work for a consulting firm, you have to learn all sorts of stuff. I love that. All right. I will also say, generally speaking, the health actuary is a little more like that, roughly, than the life side. Mike Mayberry is a coworker of mine who's a life actuary, and there are several jobs we work on together. I always will joke with him. I'm like, how do you do this life stuff? It's so formulaic, methodical. It's boring. And he's like, how do you do the health stuff? There's no right answer. All right. So you do within the actuarial field, even though we're all, good math students, you have to kind of figure out, do you want a little more of the formulaic, or do you want more of the uncertainty, no right answer type stuff? And I love the uncertainty, no right answer type stuff.
That's really interesting. I love this idea of a pancake or a pretzel.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's a good analogy. So you've gotten to work with a lot of different people in your experience at Lewis and Ellis. So when you're going into these projects or when you're taking on a new client, what kinds of things do you look for who to work with or who to bring on as clients, and maybe who to bring on to a particular project? What aspects of the person do you look for? Yeah,
but before I get into that, what I want to mention is, so, Ben gave me a great introduction, and I do like to think I, can communicate with people, but I will say it can be a learned skill. All right. If you ask anyone that knew me when I was in high school or even in undergrad, I was the reserved actuary type. I was. All right. It takes practice. And so I think you work on it. Like with my first job, which was at the insurance company, a lot of the actuaries I worked with did Toastmasters. I don't know if you're familiar with Toastmasters, but that's an organization that helps you, maybe crack open that personality kit and learn to talk in different things. Maybe it's just with clients or a bigger group like this, or even a larger group. So if you are more of a traditional actuary, don't think you can't do consulting. All right. It can be a learned skill. And now tying that to the teams I work with, I do think a lot of it depends on what projects I get and what my role is going to be. I don't do a ton of technical work anymore, but there's a few projects where I do still use a little bit of Excel. I can't go above Excel. Don't give me R or Python. Don't give me any of that stuff. But if it's Excel, I'll still do some. So if I'm doing the technical work, I need to find somebody that can maybe do the client relationship side of it, right? But if I'm doing the client management side, I am going to look at, your technical skills. Now, most actuary, most employers will assume you have your credentials. I know every single one of you have technical skills. All right. So those different qualities that really will separate. I will say the biggest one I have is reliability. All right. I've had some people work for me that, you know what, if they don't get it to me on time, I'm not going to work with. I'm just not going to assign them to a project. All right. Got to be reliable. To me, that's the biggest one. And again, a lot of the other stuff you can, work with, so typically what we would do is so my firm, we have a very large internship program, and feel free to apply. I think we had over 1,000 applicants this year. We hire about 25 people. It's actually a fairly big internship program. A lot of the employees that work with me started in that program. And what we try to do is, I will put them on different teams, try to teach them different projects, stuff like that. So you have to be, again, another quality is flexible. And, you've got to be willing to learn, ask questions. I joked about this in consulting, but it's really true. There's a lot of uncertainty. All right. You don't know, you cannot say, well, I've never done that before. I want people to say yes and figure it out. All right. Those are the kinds of people that I think are successful on my team. And then they end up, having their own successful careers.
So a lot of it comes down to reliability and just say yes.
Yeah.
Say yes and figure it out.
Yes, I am definitely a say yes. I want people to say yes and figure it out as you go. All right. Because, and like, especially in the consulting world, as I said, you're going to hit stuff you've never seen before. All right.
So I know you mentioned that you took the job at Lewis Ellis because you didn't necessarily want to travel a whole lot. So how many countries have you gotten to visit now as president of the SOA?
Yeah. So one thing is as a US based health actuary, that, no one else really does it like we do, right? So a lot of my business partners that are life actuaries at Lewis and Ellis, they traveled a little bit more than I did internationally. I never really traveled too much for my job. I've had a couple international trips, but with the SOA, that has changed. It's maybe a little bit of be careful what you wish for. I have really enjoyed the international travel. So at the SOA, when you're elected president, it's basically a 3-year commitment. You have a first year as president-elect, first 12 months. Your second 12 months is the presidential term, which I took over in November. And then you have the past president. So you're kind of you're vice chair of the SOA Board of Directors, then you're chair, and then you're kind of just a regular board member as past president. Well, so as soon as you get elected, you start doing all sorts of travel for various reasons. Stuff like this, right? It's engagement with students. We do a lot of employer meetings, so we'll go to certain big cities where there are large actuarial employers, because we want to hear from the chief actuaries of those companies to make sure what we're doing is preparing, the students for that. So I think so. When I got elected, I found out in September a couple years ago, and they said, "Can you go to China in 2 weeks?" We somehow got the visa thing figured out in a couple weeks. So I, of course, had never been to China. So that was an experience for me. And I'll be honest, it was, as you guys probably all know, you go somewhere a little different. It can be interesting. I was in and I apologize if I'm butchering the town name, but I went to Suzhou and loved it. But it was different, right? I had never been in that environment. I think I was the only white person I saw for 5 days. That was a little different for someone coming from Southern US. But I love interacting with the people over there. I love the culture. And that's really what I've enjoyed with a lot of this, travel is doing stuff like that. So I've been to mainland China now. I've been to Hong Kong, went to Bangkok. Let's see, I'm going to Mumbai here in a couple weeks for a conference. this is maybe not huge international travel, but I've never been to Mexico City. I'll be doing that in the fall. And then my kind of last big trip as president will be in Tokyo. And I'm super excited about that. I've heard nothing but fantastic stuff about that. That's when my wife is actually going to try to piggyback and go with me on that as well. So, but the travel is great. I will say it has been hard. I'm still doing my day job. I'm not working. I'm still working typical consulting actuary hours and adding on the SOA volunteer stuff. It's been a challenge, but we're getting there.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm kind of getting at. You're a really busy guy between the presidency and between your personal life and balancing your role at Lewis and Ellis. And so in a given day, how do you structure your day when you wake up in the morning to be successful, given that you have all of this going on? And kind of what habits do you get into to make sure that you have a successful day when you wake up in the morning?
So I'd say two things, and they're very small, but they have helped me immensely. One is, and again, this sounds so simple, but I break down let's basically say I have my assistant that helps me. We created Outlook rules. I have 4 email folders. All right. I am like a lot of people. I would get caught up and, oh, I got a new email. Right. And you want to check it. And you're giving that email more importance than what you were doing at the time. Right. So I have a system and it's amazing for me. Maybe you've got some other system that'll work, but basically my assistant puts everything into one of 4 buckets. If it's in bucket 0, that's kind of the triage. I don't even touch that because I don't know what the priority level is yet. I don't even look at it. Then there's a 3, a 2, and a 1. And the way I look at it is if she's put it in the 3, you know what? I'll look at it on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. when I have my coffee and my kid's still asleep, kind of a thing. The 2s typically are, let's say, projects or conversations I'm involved in, but like I'm a CC on it. I'm not the 2, right? It's not asking a direct question of me. So I'll maybe get into it in a couple days. I know I probably need to look at it, but it's not immediate. And then there's the 1 folder. And that's like, you better get on it today. All right. So that's how that has really helped me.
So where do my emails go when I email you?
You don't want to know. We're not going to disclose that, Austin. The second thing that I have done is I kind of like Sunday afternoon. I'm a big football fan. I'm watching the games. I'll have my laptop on. I kind of pre-plan the week ahead. All right. So that pre-planning helps a lot. And a lot of that pre-planning is I look where the gaps are and I block them off. So I will schedule time. No one can get a hold of me. All right. That has helped a lot. Now, obviously, I can't do a ton of that, right? But we all need that sanity break, right? And somewhat related to that, it doesn't always work. I try not to do real work on a Friday. All right. I try to do Monday to Thursday. That's my hardcore projects, checking in with the staff. Friday, I do have to do some calls with clients or whatever, but I try to block Fridays off too. Again, that's to maybe catch up on some of those emails and those folders I kind of put off, stuff like that. So really, I would say block off time for yourself. And then when you are working or doing stuff, you've got to prioritize it.
Yeah, it sounds like self-care. Sounds like taking care of your
I
mental.
try. I don't know how successful I am at it, but I'm trying.
So you don't use AI at all to plan out your week and all that kind of stuff?
I have not to date used AI much for planning it out.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go down the road of what do I use AI for? I do use AI quite a bit for like report writing. All right. I like to think I'm decent at that for an actuary. My mother was an English teacher for 40 years and let's just say I had to do a lot of English when I was a kid for a math person. But I use AI quite a bit for, let's say, editing. I always, at least right now, I try to always do the first draft of a report for a client, but I'll use AI to, like I used it the other day. I'm working on an expert witness litigation case for some attorneys, and it's like a 80-page report. All right. So I'm writing through it. Well, I think I kind of lost the thread a little bit, throughout it, writing that report. So I put it into ChatGPT and I said, basically, edit it first of all, but like, did what I say in paragraph 79 make sense with what I said in paragraphs 4 to 5? And it really helped me. Like I did lose the thread a little bit, and it says you got to do this, you kind of missed this. So that's where I use AI the most right now.
And so as a consultant, AI carries a lot of risks. And so within your consulting practice, I mean, as far as, maybe data breaches or hallucinations or just plain getting stuff wrong. So within consulting practice, how do you manage that kind of risk when you're dealing with, a client that's dependent upon the work?
So no one in this room, except for maybe a couple people, will know this reference, but we had a US president that was famous for the phrase, trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And that's what you really have to do with AI. And I'll be honest, I don't know if we're quite to the place where you can even trust it yet. All right. So we are at my company, we are, let's say, working through one of the FSAs that I work with is kind of leading that, I'll call it best practices team, how to use it, not to use it. We are encouraging our staff to use it. All right. We're not saying don't use it. We do think the opportunities do outweigh the risks, but the risks are there. So, it is interesting. I used it. I was actually speaking at a SOA event, and I thought I was asking ChatGPT, and I know we're being recorded, but no one can repeat this story. So we have what are called actuarial standards of practice. All right. And I was doing a presentation on it, and I'll be honest, I kind of didn't trust but verify. And I basically put the ASOPs into ChatGPT. Call it a 6 to 8 page document. That'd be pretty simple. And I told ChatGPT, I'm doing this presentation on it. Make me a couple slides. And I think I said something, I don't know, pick 6 things out of this bulleted list or whatever. I'll be honest, I didn't really trust but verify. Luckily, I caught it before I did the presentation. It made stuff up that was not in that 6 to 8 page. So it's great. It did create the presentation for me, but it added in a bunch of stuff. I would have made an embarrassment of myself if I didn't catch it. So that's what we're trying to do with our staff now is we're encouraging people to use it, but you really have to be careful. And obviously within an employer, we have younger staff doing certain things. The way we're kind of framing it is, at least do a few checks before you go up one rung on the kind of corporate ladder, and then that person will review it again and so forth. But you do have to review it quite a bit because, you do not want to send something that's wrong or inaccurate or whatever to a client because you might get 1 second chance with a client that's paying you a fair amount of money for your expertise, but they're not going to give you, 2 or 3 chances.
And the actuarial world is quite small too.
Oh, it's very small.
So reputation is everything.
Reputation is everything. It is. Yeah.
So outside of AI, and so particularly you're in the health space, what sort of innovations are you seeing? And then I've got another follow-up question on that, but what sort of innovations are you seeing within the health space as far as things that folks should be aware of coming out of school and things that maybe are going to kind of take over a little bit?
Yeah, I would say what you guys in your position really need to figure out is you could be in a little different world than I was, right? When I started, we were actually doing some stuff on paper, right? And then we did Excel and stuff like that, right? And you guys are going to have the best computer power ever. that, will do all sorts of stuff, but you're gonna have to figure out how to explain it. So that's what I really recommend you guys thinking about is how are you going to be able to communicate with your boss, your clients on something where we're probably all gonna maybe ultimately plug it into some black box, but you're gonna have to explain it. And you're going to, it's gonna be the most powerful computer ever, but you are still gonna have to, have judgment, right? Deciding when to use it, not use it. There's ethics aren't something a computer really cares about, right? So you're gonna have to think about stuff like that. So I do think the challenge for us at the SOA and you guys as you're going in is being able to communicate something that's kind of given to you, kind of a thing.
And so to follow up on that, I mean, we talked a lot about working with a variety of people, and within consulting, in a lot of cases, there is no right answer. And so what non-actuarial perspectives on risk do you think are most important for health actuaries in particular to adopt in order to assess the risk and come up with an answer when there's not necessarily a right one?
Yeah, so I'm going to keep harping on it a lot of time. So most of the time, my projects are a range. You got to give a range, all right? Because you, for one, reputation, you don't want to, the old joke is no actuary is ever right. We're kind of like the weathermen, right? We're going to be wrong, but you want to be less wrong, all right? I will say, so kind of the non-actuarial, the non-actuarial kind of people we deal with, it does differ between like health and life. I will say the one kind of group of people I deal with a lot on the health. So one of my areas of expertise within the health world is I do healthcare reform. I don't know if you guys know the phrase Obamacare, ACA, our system in the US the last 15 years. And that's a market I am deeply involved with. And let's just say that a little old math geek from Oklahoma never thought he was going to have to deal with politicians and explaining the numbers. And this kind of goes to my point of you have to be able to explain it. You guys may not know kind of the blue and the red, the Republican and Democrat in the US, but generally the North is Democratic. Generally the South is Republican. My running joke is if I make the state of Vermont and the state of Louisiana both yell at me, I'm doing something right. All right. I got to be in the middle. And so there's risk there because a lot of times when you're dealing with politicians, they really do try to kind of force you into an answer or polish it one way versus polishing it another way. So, it can be a challenge. And I know on the life side, a lot of times the actuaries have to deal with accountants, just dealing with like kind of the auditing role, things like that. So depending on which discipline you end up with, you're going to have kind of a different subset of other professions that you will work with. On the health side, I also deal with a lot of attorneys. That's a whole nother skill too. Trying to communicate, again, technical things to a very non-technical audience. And then it works both ways. They're trying to communicate legal stuff to me. And I've had to, do a lot of research and figure all that stuff out as well.
And it is a lot of research, but I think actuaries more and more these days are having to wear a lot of these different hats and have a little bit of an understanding of all these other different professions in order to work cohesively, especially in consulting.
Yeah. So one of the things we do at my company, and I did it when I started 27 years ago, is we cross-train all of our actuaries in compliance. Okay. What does that mean? That basically means think of the kind of physical policy form, the contract that you sign, the health insurance policy, the life insurance policy. But that's like the legal document that spells out the benefits, right? It was our position that if you don't know what's in that document, how are you going to price a policy? How are you going to price for that risk? If you can't develop that policy form. So one of the first things I did when I was hired was I basically, for a small client, I wrote a health insurance policy. All right. That takes a lot more research. It was not what my training was. So you really, that cross training. Another thing, I mentioned the Affordable Care Act, when that came on board in 2010, 2011. I was fortunate enough to be hired by the state of Louisiana, and they hired an attorney and me, and we wrote their new laws for that work. Won't bore you with all the details, but in the state of Louisiana, insurance companies could basically do whatever the heck they wanted. They could basically say, I'm going to sell a health insurance policy, and they didn't have to tell anybody what they were going to charge. It was that bad. All right. So I had to go in and write the laws, and thankfully there's still the laws on the books, and they haven't had to change them, thankfully. But you do have to learn to do stuff outside of your comfort zone that's very related to what you do.
That's really interesting. So what was it like? I mean, you're saying you literally wrote the new laws.
Yeah.
So kind of speaking more broadly on the profession at the time, what was it like to have that sweeping reform come in and shake everything up?
Oh, yeah, that was nuts. So the first half of my career was under one set of rules, basically. So I was trained as a health actuary under one set of rules, which in the US health was basically, I apply for health insurance. If they find out about my tricky back, they're either going to tell me you have to pay me more, pay the insurance company more because you're likely going to have surgery, or they're going to say, we're not even going to issue you coverage at all.
Mm-hmm.
All right. ACA comes on board, and an analogy I used not too long ago may not be the best analogy, but I used a Halloween example for this. All right. So, on Halloween, little kids go knocking on the door and you give them candy, right? So the bad analogy I thought of was now in the US health insurance industry is, so when someone knocks on your door, so I go to a health insurance company, I knock on their door and I say, I want coverage with you. So that little kid knocks on the door, and that little kid sees you have the biggest, best Snickers and M&Ms, and the next door neighbor's got little, the small little miniatures, right? Where's that kid gonna go? He's gonna go get all the Snickers, and you can't turn them down. If they want to come in your house and eat all your house and home, everything in your pantry,
Mm-hmm.
you have to take them. Next year rolls around, Halloween comes again. If they want to stay in your house, you can't kick them out. You can't say, go get candy from my neighbor. They're going to eat you out of house and home again. You can't charge them more. You can't say, you're eating all my good candy, I'm going to charge you double. Nope. So the rules changed. So what did we do? We had to implement new programs. I know Austin has dealt some with risk adjustment. So we had, when the ACA came on board, we called them the 3 R's: reinsurance, risk corridors, and risk adjustment. Risk adjustment is the only one that's left, but that is the mechanism that helps protect me that bought all that expensive candy. And then my neighbor, let's say, had all the carrots. Who are they going to get? They're only going to get the people, the vegans and the yoga people, right? But carrots are way cheaper, right? And they maybe spent some money on it, but they don't get to keep all that money. They have to give me, their neighbor, money to pay for all the extra kids I have in my house eating all my candy. That's what risk adjustment basically is, right? So risk adjustment basically means if an insurance company has all the healthy people and they charged $100, but you didn't go to the doctor, no one went to the doctor, they don't get to keep that $100. They have to give it to the insurer who charged $100, but everyone cost them $200. All right. So that, I was joking earlier about health insurance being easy. Risk adjustment's probably one of the nastiest actuarial things, or that's the one really, nasty health calculation that we deal with. And one of the wrinkles to that is basically it's a zero-sum game. So what do I mean by that is no one's putting money into the system to pay for all that candy. It's only the candy, it's only the amount of dollars spent by your neighbor. So if someone gives $100, someone gets $100. There's no new money put into the system. It's just trading those premium dollars around. So that is very, very difficult for a health actuary to price a product or estimate reserves, because risk adjustment depends on what your neighbors are doing. It's hard enough to estimate reserves for your own company. We've been doing that for hundreds of years, and it's hard. Now, at the same time, I have to estimate someone else's reserves. And how are you supposed to know some other company's numbers? It's hard. So that is the one aspect of health insurance that's pretty nasty.
Yeah, I hadn't heard you use that analogy before. I think we'll put that in the next paper. Let me ask you this: what happens when the candy's too good and the number gets too big for the carrot folks?
Well, that happens. I've got a small client right now that is pretty healthy. All right, and as I mentioned, it's all relative to everyone else that offers coverage. And let's just say we are struggling. So financial statements in 12/31. We have preliminarily looked at how much my small, very small, healthy company is going to have to give the biggest, sickest health insurer in the state. And let's just say it's a challenge. I think I got a text message today that I have a call now scheduled Thursday at 4:30. Try to figure it out. It is hard. There have been a lot of small insurers in the US that have not survived. All right. It is a stability issue. As I mentioned, there were some other R's. They're not really helping all that much, or they're kind of gone away. But it is a challenge. So like with this small client of mine, we attempt to be fairly conservative in our pricing, because we knew it was a risk that we might have to pay the Blue Cross plan that gets all the sick people. We knew there was a chance, so we tried to be conservative. So this was, I guess, 2 years ago with this company. We thought we were 20% conservative. All right, we thought, again, using my round $100, we were going to charge $120. All right, we thought we were being conservative. Well, again, we based that being conservative on what we thought the other carriers were going to charge. The state of Texas called us and said, you're about half of what everyone else is charging. Mm-hmm. And we thought we were being conservative. So again, it's a constant dialogue with your client, and just constant, working the numbers, different approaches. So like what we're trying to do now is within risk adjustment, a lot of those dollars that get shifted from from the healthy insurer to the sick insurer is based on what is coded in the health record, right? That's how the federal government figures out how much goes from company A to company B. Well, we have kind of determined small company may not be the most robust in terms of all of their procedures. And so part of what our conversation is going to be Thursday, we had one last week too, is we basically told them to hire a bunch of doctors to go to all their members and make sure everything is coded. So when the federal government goes to look at the health record, oh, they do have diabetes, so you get $5 extra or whatever. So that is a lot of what you got to do.
And that's another perspective on risk, is from the medical side, that the actuary has to kind of understand is, you have to dig into the ICD-10 codes and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And know things from the medical side. So, back to what you're saying on the pricing, the former CFO at Florida Blue, I heard him say one time that it's like a street fight every year. Pricing for the AC.
Every 12 months, man, it's a battle.
Yeah.
It's a battle. And you don't know who's going to be in the fight. You're not always told if someone's leaving. You're not always told if someone new's coming in. Well, I just said it's a zero-sum game. Mm-hmm. So when you're trying to estimate a premium, it's kind of hard to estimate a premium if someone's leaving and you don't know about it, and they leave and maybe they left because they have all the sick people. And guess what? You're gonna get all the sick people.
Mhm.
And you estimated that originally you thought you were gonna get the healthy people. All right, so it is a street fight. There's no question.
So maybe kind of beyond ACA plans and that space, what other areas within health do you think are areas for growth in the near term, and things that maybe young career actuaries should focus on being experts in?
So my recommendation to all of you, and as I joke, like I can't program, I can barely add 2 + 2 anymore, right? But the data, know a language, 2 languages, 3 languages in terms of, SAS, SQL, Python, R. That is going to get you a long way. I will also say, know your data, the data visualizations, data analysis piece. I'll readily admit, like when I was starting, about your age, I get a big data set and you make sure it doesn't smell bad, right? You make sure there's no anything major wrong. But now you guys are in a position to really make sure the data analytics is way better. So like I might have just taken this block of data from 2 years ago, make sure it doesn't have major errors in it. I project it 2 years, and that's what I'm going to use for premiums. Well, now what we're getting into a lot with AI as well is in the predictive analytics side of it, you guys can go in and really pull back the layers and really understand what's causing those results. So from a premium standpoint, a lot of times we might just rate from age and gender, right? If you're a certain age, you get charged more, a certain gender, you may get charged more. Well, that may be all that, like in the ACA, that's all you can really, you can't charge for gender, all right? You can charge for age. You can't charge for someone that has a bad back, but that doesn't mean you guys can't go in and analyze all the data and be predictive on who might ultimately end up with the bad back. You may not be able to charge for it, but at least you can start planning your risk management around it. Like if you've got 500 people that are going to have bad backs, you're going to go buy reinsurance. You're going to go do something else. So we didn't do a whole lot of that when I was younger, right? It was just, all right, let's just look at the differences by age and gender and things like that. But you can literally pull back what I call a lurking variable. You can go find that information that is lurking in the data that we really couldn't. So if you can do that, that's fantastic.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that sort of stuff nowadays kind of does get you everywhere, is understanding in depth the data analytics part of it. And that's something that I think the SOA is backing in a big way too, is this concept of fairness in premiums and understanding, for example, in car insurance, where you can tell somebody's gender, fairly well by how big the motor in their car is, things like that. And so that's the classic example, I guess. And so that's something that's really popular in the research world right now too. And I know a whole lot of people that are working on that. Getting back to you, Dave, you've got a heck of a brand that you have built, a personal brand. And this is something that I really wanted to get out to the students is, I mean, obviously you're all over LinkedIn, but socially at large, you have built yourself a fantastic brand. And I wanted to ask, how can students work on that, kind of even starting now, to build their own personal brand to set themselves up for success in their careers?
Yeah, I've got a few suggestions. So obviously the LinkedIn stuff is kind of the mechanical, go connect with people. If you're not connected with me, please do. I'll be happy to connect. But a few things, I do think it kind of starts with your job. And again, it kind of goes to that reliability, right? You want your boss, you want the people you work with know you're reliable. All right. And then as Austin mentioned, it is a small field. It gets around. If you're not, I had a individual, unfortunately, I kind of had to let go. And, officially, employer-wise, I can't say anything. But then he goes to somewhere else and kind of had the same problems. The next thing you know, he's not an actuary. He went to become an underwriter. So you need to be reliable I really harp that. But I will also say, I joked earlier, my mother was an English teacher, and I did learn one thing. She made me read a lot of poetry. All right. Maya Angelou. I don't know if you know who Maya Angelou is, and I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to get it right. My mom may be mad at me. I won't get it exactly right. But basically, the gist is she said, people will forget what you said and forget what you did, but they're not going to forget how they made you feel. All right.
Mhm.
And that really is a lot of what guides me when I network, when I meet with people. I need to realize that's what people are going to remember about me. All right. I had a session at an SOA thing a few years ago. I misspoke. I said something kind of wrong about ASOP 8. People kind of chuckled at the meeting. Have I ever heard about that again? Nope. I brought it up just now, but people don't remember that I messed up a couple bullet points on ASOP 8. All right. They remember my interactions with them. And that goes a long way, with the brand. I would also say, in terms of some of the mechanical things you could do, one thing that I would recommend you guys do is write, like short little, these don't have to be long, but like something you're studying that you find interesting, write a page, 2-page, post it on LinkedIn, email it to me, contact me and say, hey, would you mind liking it? Would you mind making a comment? And it's those things. And then people start knowing you're an expert in an area, or curiosity is a big thing. Kind of back to what I look for. I look for people that are curious. I don't want people that just say, well, I'm an expert at this and that's all I'm going to do. So
People that want to expand their knowledge across domains.
Yes.
Yeah, so that kind of ties back into the different perspectives and working with different people and knowing a lot about every little part of the process. So I wrote to all of the students here, and I was asking them, what they'd like to ask you, and far and away, this was the biggest question that folks had, and I think that it stems from kind of there's a lot of anxiety now with AI coming in, right? And will AI replace the actuary? I don't think so. I don't think you think so either. But even going farther than that, you've got a lot of influencers on the internet saying you don't even need a college degree anymore. You're going to have AI, things are going to take over. You don't have to worry about any of this kind of stuff anymore. And actuarial science presents kind of a long road. And so far and away, the biggest question was about credentialing and about if I'm putting in this investment, to do the long thing and get this degree and then go further than that, take the 10 exams, get to the FSA. Put in this time and expense, what can I expect at the end of that road? And besides that, I'd like to ask you just kind of general advice as students are entering the early phase of their career. What sort of things are you most passionate about letting people know early on?
So I'm going to start with the first comment about the AI. My opinion is AI is not going to take your job if you know AI. If you don't know AI, you're not going to have a job. All right. You're going to have to integrate. You're going to have to be experts at AI. So I don't think it'll impact you guys. It may be a little bit down the road, but actuaries are going to have to know AI. All right. But I don't think it's going to take our jobs. All right. As I said earlier, there's always going to have to be that judgment, ethical decision making of somebody that takes that data and does stuff with it. All right. In terms of the long process, yes, it is a long process. We like to think that there is value. I will say, some of you, I think you were maybe somewhat involved with it. So here at the SOA, we did just do, redesign the FSA pathway. All right. So we did redesign. We definitely understand maybe, quite a bit versus when I was taking exams. There are other things. There wasn't a data science degree when I was coming out, right? So we understand there are opportunities for people like you to go into other fields. That's one reason we modified the FSA pathway. That's why with the ASAs, we have micro credentials now, steps along the way. I do think that the key thing with the FSA pathway, and I think that is helpful, is the way we're doing it now is you're not necessarily pick a path health actuary like I did with exams, all right? Or pick a path life actuary. You can mix and match a little bit because we know that the market wants people that can do a little bit of everything, right? So I have staff that work for me. They're based in India, and I'll be honest, I didn't know this before I hired them a few years ago, but they are all like health insurance and general insurance. In the US, we don't really do property, casualty, general, and health at the same time, but they do in India. And with the FSA pathway redesign, you can do that kind of stuff. So you can be a little more flexible. So we understand that. You know, what the SOA does is education, right? That is, education and research. So we fully are, looking at the education pathway at all time. It is still, maybe kind of the bare minimum is, at least in the US and a lot of countries, there is a regulatory requirement to have the credentials. I don't see that going away anytime soon. So at a bare minimum, there's always going to have to be actuaries to sign actuarial opinions, things like that. What was the last one, like how to prepare? What was the last part of that?
Yeah, but before we go to that,
Yeah.
I do think that's what's so important about insurance as an industry is the heavy regulation. I think that's kind of why AI is not going to penetrate into the insurance industry as far as it might in other industries. And so I think it's a great time in the world of AI to be an actuary because you can use these tools to their fullest capabilities to free yourself up while not having to be worried that ultimately it's going to maybe take your job one day because of that regulation that kind of presents a buffer. So I just want to open it up for you, Dave, to talk about basically whatever you're passionate about getting out to young people as they begin their careers.
Yeah, I'll circle back to what I said earlier. When I interview people, I definitely want to see like a risk taker. All right. Someone that is willing to be uncomfortable in a situation. All right. Maybe, you're from somewhere else and you moved to Texas. You've never been there before, but you're willing to do it. I love that kind of risk. Maybe I focused on life stuff, but you know what? You've got health opportunities. So that's important to me. And again, after I've hired somebody, I'm going to keep harping on it because it's important to me is say yes. I want those people that say yes and are just willing to try new things.
Just say yes. I love it.
Just say yes.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you this evening. Thank you all for being here. Let's give Dave a big hand and thank you so much. So I'll turn it back over to Sally. I think there's some trivia in store, and we'll take questions now too, I guess, as well, right? First. Yeah. So yeah. Anybody anything you'd like to ask, Dave?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so the question was about changes in the U.S. healthcare system. How does that compare to other countries? So I will, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I will say, since I am a U.S.-based healthcare actuary, do not quiz me on the Canadian system. All right. A U.S. healthcare actuary doesn't know a whole lot. I obviously know broader things. And that's somewhat of a misnomer in the U.S. as well, right? So Obamacare actually only covers about 10% of our population. Yes, she just kind of went, ooh, right? That is the reaction you get most of it. That's what we get all of the media about, right? Is that 10%. That's where all the political fights you alluded to and I've talked about. But in reality, in the US, we do have Medicare, which is our kind of single payer universal, not too far from Canada and other countries, but it's just for seniors, right? So 65 and up. We also have Medicaid, which is a completely different system. And it's a mix of federal versus state. And that's for lower income. All right. So we kind of have four systems. So we have Medicare, single payer for the seniors. We have Medicaid, which is kind of a joint federal state for lower income. In the US, the healthcare system was actually created in the 1940s. I'll be honest, as a way to not pay employees money. So we gave them health insurance as a benefit. Simplistically, we gave them more stuff without having to give them money. So that employer market is about 40%. What's left is that individual market, and that's the 10%. So yeah, I joke that we don't know about other systems, but we do. The Medicare and stuff is kind of similar. But the interesting thing, and this is why I just harp on kind of saying yes and being flexible. In the US in the last 15 years, the healthcare system literally changes overnight. And I always use it now. I was actually speaking at an SOA event with a bunch of health actuaries talking about Obamacare. And while I literally was talking about all the changes with Obamacare that were going on, every single one of us had an alert on our phone that Trump did something to completely change it.
He tweeted, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, look, things change. It's somewhat even back to kind of one of the original things. People don't realize this. So you may or may not know President Obama that passed ACA, got it passed. He said in a press conference, if you like your insurance, you can keep it. That was not in the law. He said that just as a press release, like talking in front of the media. And next thing you know, all the laws had to change to make him correct and not incorrect, basically, just because he said something. So now we have what we call grandmother plans, grandfather plans, all this stuff. So yeah, and so that's why, I'll be honest, this is why I like being a health actuary. It's changing all the time. You mentioned President Trump, he's been in twice. I'll use an example. In 2017 and 18, he was trying to, my words, gut the ACA, right? It was President Obama's thing. And I won't bore you with all the details, but we have a thing called cost sharing reductions. It's a little bit of money changing hands. President Trump defunded it. Like, this is going to kill it. Guess what it did? The states reacted, I'll just be simplistic, implemented a different mechanism in reaction. It turned out it strengthened the ACA and made it way more stable. So it's just kind of weird. So that whole interaction of health policy, like the politicians think they're doing X and it turns out it actually does Y. I'll plug for something that's not quite out, and it should be out soon. You guys may know Mark Cuban. I don't know if you guys know who Mark Cuban is. I actually have a podcast with him that's coming out very soon. And the SOA, we're going to release it. Should be in the next few weeks, fingers crossed, keep an eye out for that. But a lot of what we talk about is kind of that change. Because if you know Mark Cuban, that's kind of his big thing right now, is really kind of transparency and stuff like that. So yeah, it is. That's why I like the health stuff. Everything, it changes daily. Life insurance, not so much. Other questions?
Yeah, other questions.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, sir. Firstly, sir, thank you for your here and
Thank
give us an impressive speech. Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear that you don't really believe on the AI. And I think it can be you can just represent the trend that AI will never replace the actuaries in the insurance industry. But obviously AI will never be as reliable as you. But the AI is just replacing us, other newcomers here. I mean, the most important thing for us is just looking for a job vacancy. But there is an irrefutable fact that AI is just reduce the cost of carrying a new comes here. And I just think AI is a very useful tool. So for the insurance companies, having a new employee here is not a reasonable strategy for them. So I just want to know that the kinds of insurance company always keeps original scale of the hiring newcomers. And maybe it's kind of sort of responsibilities. So I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, so the AI, I want to be kind of clear, and you kind of touched on it, is AI will help insurance companies with a lot of the repetitive stuff, right? It will be a phenomenal tool. A lot of insurance companies now are using it for underwriting. It may change some of the tasks we're going to do, but it's not going to get rid of us. We may, some of the stuff we do may be different than what you guys do is going to be different than what I did at your age, but we'll still have plenty to do because that's what, we've got to communicate those risks to our stakeholders.
And I think to get to what he was asking about is the size of the job market going to stay the same?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think?
I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. It may change things an insurance company does, but I don't think it's going to change the job market. I really don't. I do, yeah. You guys will be fine. Don't hold me to that. As I said, apply for our internship, so that'll help.
It is a good one. Yes, Ellie.
Dave, what is the biggest challenge you think you'll face?
So the question was about my biggest challenge in my presidential term. So I will say, one of the kind of misnomers when you become president is everyone kind of thinks you're elected to do something, a platform, right? Like a politician, right? You get elected for a platform. That's not really my role. I would say my role is to make sure the train stays on the track. And that can be a challenge, right? So the board, at least at the SOA board level, it's a 3-year commitment and we have rolling. So we have, let's say 6 people in year 3, 6 people in year 2, 6 in year 1. Well, some of the decisions we make, like I mentioned, the FSA pathway, that's been going on for years, right? So that one kind of concluded before I came in, but like we have other stuff, which I can't really get into, but other stuff, other strategy stuff we're doing at the SOA that, board members before me felt was great for the SOA. I come in and I help facilitate and make sure those things. So that can be a challenge. You get new board members with different opinions. You will reassess, right? You don't always just latch on to something that was decided 3 years ago. But I think it's weighing the pros and cons of decisions and going into new markets. So we have a strategic plan is kind of what's our guiding mission, I'll say. And one of the 3 is growing globally. That's a challenge, right? Historically, we have been US, Canada. You showed the numbers, though we are growing, but that is a challenge to keep growing. There are other actuarial organizations. So just making sure that our strategic plan, helping you guys with AI and, in the workforce and what you guys learn is one of the other ones. And then the Canada pipeline, I mentioned the FSA pathway. So just making sure, we stay on target with our strategic initiatives. Other questions? Yeah, in the back.
Hey, what are the details that tells you someone is taking the responsibility on this case?
You said the responsible and risk taking, is that what you said?
Yeah. I mean, that means.
So when I interviewed, I'll give you an example from when I interviewed, and I use something like this, is I'll try to say, maybe I'll try to put you in a, like an example, like I'll say, act like this happened to you. All right. So when I interviewed, it was kind of funny. So I was at the University of Iowa. I was on an actuarial basketball team. We were horrible, by the way.
What was the name of the basketball team?
Rejection Region Legion. I had rejection basketball, try to tie things together.
All right.
Was that geeky enough name for you?
I like it.
All right. So the day before interviews, I go up for a rebound. I took an elbow from the other team, and I wake up the next morning. I have the biggest, blackest, nastiest eye you have ever seen. And I wake up and I've got like 8 interviews lined up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, this is horrible. And I am going to tie it to your question, I swear. So I show up, and it's a kind of a traditional interview. And then at one point, the interviewer from Aegon, I remember, big employer, he's like, so what happened? I have to ask. And I tell him, and he's like, that's not very fun. He's like, make something up right now. And he's like, it's got to be a 5-minute minimum story. So I had to make something up on the fly. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think there was bar fights, girls, stuff like that.
Something fun.
Something fun. And he's like, well, that's all right. Now I want something work related. What happened if it occurred at work? I had to make something else up. So while I don't use that exact thing now when I interview people, but you got to keep people on their toes. I want to see you react to something you may not have prepared for, right? That is kind of where I'm going. I was not prepared to make up a story about my black eye, but I was able to do something on the fly. All right. So maybe I would ask you, what was something you did at school you learned, and you tell me. And then maybe I'll try to spin it and say, all right, what if that went completely wrong and you screwed up by a gazillion percentage points? What would you do to fix it? Right? You weren't in that situation exactly, because when you did it, it maybe didn't go wrong. But I want to see that on the fly, you could try to solve that problem of something that happened that you're not prepared for. Because a lot of the problems I run into with clients is, I'm not prepared for those questions. It happens. You got to be ready to answer something you're not prepared for.
And you got to be able to leverage the black eye a little bit too. You got to be a good storyteller.
Yeah, you do have to be good. That's a good way of saying it too. As I said, that's a learned skill, communication, storytelling. You've got to be a good storyteller, especially in the consulting world. They just say, here's the problem, and you give them an answer. No, you've got to give it in context. I talked about again in the ACA, things are related to everybody else. So what if I give an answer and then they say, well, what if this company goes out of the market? I've got to be ready. It's all, scenario testing, sensitivity testing. You've got to be prepared for something you may not have expected.
Once you get them laughing and telling stories and stuff, at that point, you've cracked the whole thing open.
Well, as I said, it's how you make them feel, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that.
You're an expert in that department, I believe, Dave.
Any other questions? Yeah. Just advice for university students? Let's see, let me think of what I would have told myself. I guess a lot of it, I'll just keep hitting on some similar themes, but maybe apply for jobs you wouldn't normally think you'd apply for. All right. Maybe you think, you know what, I don't want to move to that country or that part of this country, or, maybe even though maybe I haven't convinced you to apply for a health insurance job, but you're like, oh, I've always wanted to do property. Just apply. You don't know. You guys are young. I guess my advice, and I have a couple daughters, your guys' rough age, and as I always tell them, decisions aren't permanent at your age. Mm-hmm. All right, they're not permanent. So my advice is, if maybe another way of saying it is, if you think you want to go do this, don't freak out about it. Just do it. Say yes. Let's go. I'll take that job. And if it doesn't work out, you'll get another one. Most people have 5 or 6 jobs. It's not permanent. Don't freak out about it. All right. I know a lot of us as actuaries, we're pretty high strung. We worry about stuff. I know I do. Just, it's not permanent.
And especially, I think at this point in your life, this is the right time to make mistakes and learn something along the way, because you learn a lot about yourself, like he's saying, by branching out and discovering things about yourself you didn't know, taking a job or taking a risk that you weren't sure you wanted to do, you know. So even if it all crashes and burns and blows up in your face, at least you learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, and a lot of you guys have already kind of made a decision somewhat similar to what, so where I'm going is I don't have any regrets with any decisions I made. Maybe a little bit of me wishes maybe I did go like do an international job, you know, move somewhere else right after school. Some of you guys have already made that decision, come here for education, but don't be afraid to make the next decision and go to Europe, do something different. And again, try it out. Maybe you'll like it. I had a friend that went to work for the home office of Aegon over in Europe, and they loved it. Now they didn't end up staying there. They ended up moving back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But when you're young, you've got time to course correct. So that would be my advice. Anything else?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for the speech. Quick question. We get to know the name of the up and coming podcast, or is that classified?
So I'm not trying to keep it super secret, but there's a couple different podcast streams for the SOA. I would just go sign up for the SOA podcast. I think it's going to be through what we call the PD Edge Plus program, which is our professional development program. But keep an eye at it. Again, when it comes out, I will post it on LinkedIn. Don't worry. So go connect with me on LinkedIn. You will know when I'll make sure that I mean, I'll be honest, I was a little scared to do that podcast. I got to be honest with you. That was interesting. I hadn't been in a situation like that. I mean, I feel like Mark Cuban's maybe a little smarter than I am. But that was one of the few times that, you know, I'm fairly comfortable in situations, but that was a fun one. Turned out great, I think. But we'll make sure you see it on LinkedIn. Anything else? Yeah.
There's a question for people jumping in. You mentioned when you started your career, you were just doing math. Okay, that was sufficient. 15, 20 years ago, when I first started thinking about my career, Excel monkey was fun. And then knowing one language, one programming language or two would be a problem. And now you were recommending students that they need to know a couple of languages, and if they don't know AI, they might be replaceable. So it seems the package for an actuary keeps growing. Do you think then the bar that we're asking for young people is also growing?
So I would say the package isn't necessarily growing, but it is changing along the way. Okay. So usually those evolutions are fair. They're not like cut and dried, right? Like, so, you know, when I did paper, you know, it wasn't like I just stopped using paper immediately. I had to, you know, evolved into using Excel. And then the next thing, you know, some of my staff would evolve from Excel to SAS or doing whatever. It's an evolution. So I don't feel like everyone in this room is going to have to know 10 things. It's just going to be a different 2 or 3 things than the 2 or 3 things I had to know. And I will also say to that point is everyone you work for is not going to know, like, as I joke, I can barely do Excel formulas anymore, right? Just know that they're going to need you to do whatever it is in Python or whatever, because a lot of us is, you know, the people you're going to work for are going to be doing different roles. You know, again, I'm not in a really technical role. So take advantage of who you work for, not knowing some of this stuff, and you're going to be the ones that are doing it. Maybe different packages or different stuff. So that's kind of how I see it. Yeah.
I think some of that is AI too, that allows you to translate between different formats. And so going from Excel over to Python and these kinds of things, you have like Claude for Excel or ChatGPT for programming, where you can translate between the whatever formats you need. And so if you have a manager that wants to see everything in Excel, you can go from Pandas over to Excel through AI. So that's kind of a great way to connect everything together too, actually. So being aware of those tools, though, I think that's a great answer.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for being here.